Hello, hello, hello. Today's class is about perfect competition versus monopolies for GCSE. So let's get into it. All right, so there's not much you need to know for perfect competition, okay? The idea of perfect competition is economists have made up a situation that represents a perfect market. And what do we mean by perfect market? It's not like this in real life, but we're trying to think of something as close to a perfect market as possible. Even though it's slightly unrealistic, this is how demand and supply can work more easily as a theory. So let me show you the 5 rules that they made. The first rule then, many buyers and sellers. So in this market, we've got lots of people buying and we've got lots of companies selling the goods. And a perfect example of this might be 100 orange farmers right next to each other. The next thing is the products are homogeneous. What do I mean by that? It just means they're all the same. They're pretty much exactly identical with very little difference. So we've got all these farmers lined up selling exactly the same type of oranges from the same farm. I haven't seen this in many places in the world, but in China, it is everywhere. For example, if you're going to go climb a mountain, there's like thousands of shops in a line selling the same incense sticks. Absolutely wild. Also, the idea of perfect information. You perfectly know what you want to buy. You can't be tricked. You've got great knowledge of the oranges and the groves they came from. Next, free entry and exit. So there's no licenses needed for firms. They don't have to buy a shop front or anything like that. They can quickly come, set up a market stall, sell their oranges. And the 5th thing is price takers. This confuses a lot of GCSE students. But basically in the market, we have our demand and supply graph for goods, if you remember that. And that demand and supply graph, it represents the price of goods in the market for the whole market, but the individual firm, they are price takers. So just to help you explain this, and you don't need this graph for GCSE, but you do need your demand and supply graph. If I draw a little poorly done demand and supply graph here, and this represents all firms in a perfectly competitive market, and we've got our price here, and we've got our quantity here. See that line? I don't know why the software does that sometimes, but it looks pretty cool anyway. We'll let them off. Right, so basically, you see how this goes across with supply and demand meeting equilibrium? Basically, this price matches this line here. And this line is the individual firm, and this line is the whole market. Basically, all the firms in the market and all the people buying these goods and services, that leads to the firm being a price taker, and they've got no choice but to accept this price of $6 for a bunch of oranges. If they charge more than that, no one will buy from them because demand is perfectly elastic. And if they charge below that, they'll have lots of customers. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, don't worry, because you don't need this individual firm graph at GCSE. I'm just trying to explain the concept in a little bit more detail. Okay, so we know there's no control over the price. They're price takers. People have perfect information, and it's easy to enter and exit the market. Now, normally I'd ask you to look online and think of some firms close to this as possible in your country. Some examples might be Facebook, Insta, Snapchat, all those social media firms where you are the product. You put your information on there and then you can communicate with others. And of course, farmers markets. Now, moving forward, let's look at the different type of market known as a monopoly market. They're quite different to the perfectly competitive markets. So, different to the 5 rules we just looked at, monopolies, they have one seller because it's a product that might be really special or unique, and it's different to all other products. So think about these oranges. In the last example, we used oranges that are pretty common from the same area, right? Now imagine these are those special Japanese oranges and they have music played to them every day, and they're given the finest nutrients to grow, and the temperature is regulated all the time. Okay, so they're a unique product. There's high barriers to entry, meaning the setup costs are going to be really high. You've got warehouse fees, staff fees, you've got to pay for expertise to help grow these things. And because of this, they are the price maker, not the price taker. They determine the price. If they say $50, you pay $50. And their goal basically is to profit maximize. Of course, make a really good product, but ultimately what a business is wanting to do, maximize profits, make that beautiful, delicious, tasty money. Now, here's a little video that I like on Monopolies.
This is a diamond.
I just love finding new places to wear.
Diamond? Yes.
It's overwhelming.
Will you marry me?
Yes.
The world's most brilliant gem. Exquisite. Beautiful. Pure. Precious. Rare. Total lie. Not rare at all. Diamonds are abundant Diamonds are cheap, and they are definitely forever, not forever.
Holy crap!
They're excavating 2.5 billion-year-old rock.
They're carbon, and you can grow them in a lab for like 30% of the cost of real diamonds.
Call her chandelier. White diamond. Diamond.
So,
Yeah, he's got a good point there. And the technology is getting better and better. The thing about lab-grown diamonds, though, is they are perfect. They're perfect in structure. And many natural diamonds have imperfections that people like. So they were still willing to pay a little bit more for them. So we're going to look at why this is called a monopoly. And I want you to think about the demand and supply graph as they're watching this to understand how monopolies make their money, okay?
how did we get here? And who's to blame for this diamond debacle? That was pretty dramatic.
Diamonds are rare, and they're not. Oh, we don't buy it. You think that women care about it? Like, whether they get it real, trying to see how much it's worth?
We need to understand what a diamond even is. Okay, diamond. This thing. It's just made of carbon, with each little carbon atom bonded together isometrically, which basically means it's the same in all directions, and it's very similar to the lead in your pencil. That's graphite, just a slightly different structure of carbon. That's it, and carbon is all around us. Now, I guess what makes them a bit harder to come by is the fact that they form deep in the Earth's crust under immense temperature and pressures. Then they have to transport to Earth's surface in magma chambers and cool very slowly to grow into the big crystals we all love. Okay, great. Clear. So how do we go from carbon being everywhere to diamonds being rare wedding jewels? I'm glad you asked. So, 800 BC India, the Dravidian people start finding these rough diamonds in riverbeds.
What is this?
So they harvest them, and because they're actually scarce, precious gems, they start using them in trade for silk and spices. But at the time, these are like dull, blackish hunks of carbon. They're basically rocks. But fast forward to 1869, South Africa. See, they're really good at exporting wool and sugar. And I don't know about you, but wool and sugar aren't particularly interesting. So naturally, the Europeans wanted nothing to do with South Africa until 1886, when this South African farmer finds a 22-carat diamond in a local riverbed. Well, I guess that they're gonna start some trouble for us, huh? Yeah, because in walks Cecil Rhodes.
I reckon this mine is all mine now.
So he buys this massive diamond mine in South Africa, the De Beers mine. But Rhodes has a problem, see, because all these farmers started finding rare diamonds in South Africa. The price of diamonds was falling off a cliff. They were everywhere. They were...
Can you put this on a demand and supply graph? If the production of diamonds increases substantially, what happens to supply? It increases, right? And then what happens to the price of diamonds? It drops. All right, let's continue.
Rare at all. So tons of these mines start closing, and Rhodes is like,
Oh my gosh, I need to control supply and demand of diamonds or I'm doomed.
pause. You hear this all the time.
These markets are undersupplied. Supply chain begins in America.
Demand this, supply that. Demand is skyrocketing, yada, yada, yada. But for the most part, our world operates in perfect competition. That means our markets set prices because everybody has the same information. So if your bougie neighborhood shop is price gouging for ground meat, well, you can just go to Walmart and pay the market rate. It needs to limit supply and maximize demand. Because if he can do this, prices shoot up and his profits are maximized. Excellent. Okay, so our dude Rhodes is worried.
All these South African mines are obliterating the price of diamonds by flooding the market with these not so rare gems.
So what does he do? Well, he does what any good monopolist would do. He keeps pretending diamonds are scarce. So, funded by the Rothschild family, Rhodes goes and buys up all the failing South African mines and consolidates them into a cartel, De Beers Consolidated Mines Limited. And they go on a tour around the world, opening up satellite offices of De Beers with pseudonyms so people didn't know it was a monopoly.
See, he monopolized. He bought all of the production centers. Then he can control them, right? He doesn't have to release those diamonds to the public. he can store them somewhere and release them slowly.
It's Diamond Development Corporation in Africa, CSO, Central Selling Organization in Europe, Diamond Trading Company in England, the Syndicate in Israel. But of course, De Beers still got a problem. See, it's the Great Depression in the US, and they're having trouble convincing poor Americans that they should spend their hard-earned, limited money on a not-so-precious piece of carbon. Enter N.W. Ayer, this famous ad agency in the US. They're like,
Demand for these diamonds isn't high enough.
so they start giving them to big celebrities.
You get a diamond. You get a diamond. And you get a diamond. Look, chump, you better wear this thing like your status depends on it.
Even still, this isn't enough to influence poor Americans, so they pull out the nuclear option.
Listen here, shrimps. We need something new. Something bold. Something to get these poor Americans to buy our diamonds like it's nobody's monopolistic business.
Sir, how about a new slogan like "Diamonds are forever"?
Diamonds are forever. There. Diamonds is forever. Yeah, riff on that, young gun.
How about, quote, "How else could 2 months' salary last forever"?
You're telling me someone's gonna spend 2 months' salary on this piece of carbon? Brilliant!
So now you've got these ads rolling out everywhere.
Salary lasts forever. A diamond is forever. De Beers.
Sean Connery as James Bond, 007 in Ian Fleming's Diamonds Are Forever.
And all the while, this entire diamond industry is run by one company, De Beers, or whatever all their fake names were in different countries. Let me just fix this. The good news? Is there good news? Yes, the good news. People found out about this De Beers Shell Corporation in the 2000s. They've been broken up, and now they're like 35% of the world's rough diamond supply.
Okay, so after watching that video, what do we think? How did the situation work? Well, there were some clues there, right? They restrict their supply. De Beers went to loads of different countries and bought the diamond operation facilities. Or should I say, De Beers went to loads of countries and bought the diamond mining facilities. They then advertised diamonds to the public, said they're for weddings, they're forever. If you don't spend 2 months of your salary, what does it even mean? So can you draw the demand and supply graph to show what happened there? So remember, for this demand and supply graph, there are two effects: advertising and restricting supply. They own the supply, so they don't need to sell a lot immediately. And if you really understand the graph, what happens to revenue? All right, so have a look at this graph then. Did you get something like this? Firstly then, we can see that with all that extra advertising, people were encouraged to buy it. They saw celebrities wearing them and they thought, you know what? I like this. This looks good. I'm going to buy it for my special ceremony with my wife. Next, supply. They bought up all the manufacturers. That means they could hold on to the diamonds they get, right? Store them away and only release them slowly. If they release them slowly, what happens to price? Supply shifts back. Boom! So we have a movement from E1 to E2 to E3. We can see a substantial increase in price. But the thing is, we don't know if the quantities increased or decreased overall. And this is because we don't know the extent to which the supply line is shifted back, and we don't know the extent to which the demand line shifted forward. If we had that data, we'd have a more accurate depiction of what's going on here. All right. So here's how you would break it down in the exam. Advertisement leads to an increased awareness and therefore increased demand. Restricting supplies and monopoly leads to a shift back. It results in E1 moving to E3. Then we talk about the y-axis, what's happening there. And then we talk about the x-axis. Quantity changes are unknown. And yes, you do get a mark for saying that, so don't worry about that. What happens to revenue? Well, we knew revenue is price times quantity. So originally revenue was this box, right? And this box was 500k. And now our revenue is this box at E3. So our revenue's gone from 500 to 800k. Brilliant. What a happy company. All right. Monopolies also have trouble with the law sometimes. For example, in the UK, I was part of Lloyds Bank. They became Lloyds TSB, a bigger bank. And then the government said, nope, we're breaking you up. And now I'm a member of TSB Bank, even though I didn't sign up for those guys. The bank was becoming too large. The UK government just cut them in half, basically. Can you think of any monopolies that have run into trouble in your country? Here's a quick video of Nike in Indonesia that I want to show you. Because while monopolies produce goods that people want, sometimes they are reported to cause trouble in different countries. Here's an example.
Month, we were going to live as Nike's factory workers lived, which meant that we were going to go live in a workers' slum outside of the capital. And we were going to live on the workers' wages, $1.25 a day for the next month, to try and come maybe to a better understanding of what it's like for Nike factory workers to make this kind of money and live under these conditions. We lived in a 9x9 cement box. It was over 100 degrees, it's 100% humidity, a small window, certainly no air conditioning.
No furniture. You slept on a very thin mat on an uneven cement floor covered in shelf paper.
The streets outside of your home are lined by open sewers, and what that means, like in the rainy season, you would have all that feces just float up into the streets and into your house.
And every time that you go to the bathroom, it comes back out into the sewer for everybody else to see and smell.
You would have football-sized rats that would stampede over the ceiling at night and come up through the toilet and look for stuff to eat in the house, or the fist-sized cockroaches that would crawl over you. Play and the burning fumes I learned from the company that designs Nike shoe rubber will give off toxins and carcinogens. Kids are paying the price, and they're the ones with the chest infections, and they're the ones that are going to develop cancer. We were able to meet with a woman by the name of Dita Sari, who had been organizing Nike and Reebok factory workers at the age of 23 and was illegally jailed and put in prison and tortured.
In 8th of July 1996, I was arrested by the army, the local army in East Java. They kicked me and they used their fists and their sticks and their booth to hurt me and to torture me in front of the workers to show them an example.
I think that the majority of workers are saying, look, we don't want you to pull out the jobs. Like, we want to work. We like to work, you know. We want to make the shoes. We're proud of what we do, but we don't want to be exploited.
Quite a powerful video to explain how large monopolies with a lot of power can go to different countries and then potentially exploit them. Governments enjoy their presence because they create jobs, but there's loads of negative side effects, as we just saw. So, what are the general negatives of monopolies, and what did we see in this video? So you can combine your knowledge of demand and supply, and you can combine what we saw in this video. They can use their money and power to have something called regulatory capture, which allows them to influence the rule makers in their favor. Think about the pollution that wasn't looked after. They can make super high profits because they can produce like really, really cheap, potentially exploiting labor where they don't have really good living conditions, suppressing them when they react or complain, and then sell these products in the West for even higher amounts of money. They're inefficient in the market because remember when we looked at perfect competition and we saw demand and supply? Demand and supply is not met correctly here, as we saw. Looking at this graph, they restrict supply and forcibly increase demand. Because they control the supply, it's not a natural order in the market. And therefore we tend to have, as we'll study in A-level, lower output for higher prices. So this creates massive wealth gaps in society. And like I said, price discrimination. And hardly anyone can come into the market to contest them. They're so large, they've got so much power. Usually with large organizations, when smaller ones start to get bigger in the same field, they tend to just buy them out and dismantle them. What positives exist though? There's definitely positives to monopolies. Dynamic efficiency. They get so much profit, they can reinvest it and stay on top of the game. Think about what Apple's been doing for years. Wherever they're from, they can bring high income to that country. They're masters of economies of scale. So as they get larger, they can produce for cheaper prices. There are some natural monopolies that are really good. Like government-run monopolies like gas, electricity, water, really important, really good for society. So a big question to you then is, what do you think? Do monopolies have a place in society? Are they important? Should they be regulated? Interesting question, right? So let's have a look at an exam question then. Can you quickly note down the differences between perfect competition and a monopoly? So to answer this real exam question, it says analyze, right? So what we're really looking for is 3 key points where you express the differences between them, preferably in the same structure. So you do one little paragraph where you explain how a perfect competition is different from monopoly in one way, then another paragraph for the second way, and another paragraph for the third way. So firstly, let's think about the number of sellers. In perfect competition, how many sellers was there? Loads. What about monopoly? One main seller. 2 marks. Beautiful. Next. What about barriers to entry? In perfect competition, you can just go up and sell your oranges. In a monopoly, oh no, you need so much stuff to put in the background to make sure your oranges are the best they can be in order to start selling them. You might need extra licenses. You might need millions of dollars in infrastructure to start. So, perfect competition, there are no barriers to entry, but in monopoly there are. You see how chill this is getting the marks? As long as you understand the key word, analyze. Next, firms in perfect competition are price takers. They got no choice but to accept the market price. But a monopoly, they're the price maker. Think about the diamonds and how they manipulated the market. In perfect competition, consumers have perfect knowledge. They understand the market thoroughly. But consumers in a monopoly with one producer don't have perfect knowledge. In many cases, they've got no choice but to buy from that organization if they want that unique product. Or here's another little caveat, concentration. In perfect competition, there's so many firms selling the same goods, there's no concentration there. But in a monopoly, it's just one company, so it's a larger concentration. And also the idea of substitutes. In a perfect competition, you can substitute this guy's product for the next product, for the next product, for the next product. And like I said, in a monopoly, it's a unique product. Very hard to substitute it for something else. Think about having one company that produces insulin if you're a diabetic, and you've got no choice but to buy from them. All right, that's it from me. If you need any private resources like my revision guides or any private lessons, just click the link down below and I'll see you again.